Let's open the special meeting on the February 10th for, we'll open it to public discussion.
No, there's no public comment.
Oh, because is this a closed session?
Oh, yeah, there is public discussion.
Yeah, no public. Anybody from the public? Okay, so we're looking at ordinance. We're not going to read it, just start it.
No.
Who's going to do this?
I'll do it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
So this is an urgency ordinance that follows up from our discussion on Tuesday night regarding our delinquent fees to our customers.
Can you hear us, Gary?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I can
Make
hear.
sure.
thank you.
This spurs off of our discussion from Tuesday night regarding the delinquent fees due to the water shutoff moratorium. So what I have before you today is a red line, is an urgency ordinance for first reading and adoption. And there's a red line version showing two different options. One would be for the delinquent fees to be adjusted to 2% from May 2020, which is 2 months after the beginning of the pandemic of March 2020. And the other one is for us to treat each account individually. And for the first 2 months that they incur late fees, they would be at 10%. And thereafter, they would be at 2% through March of 2022.
This is what we talked about the other night.
There's two different interpretations. So there's two different options of how you would interpret what the discussion was
I
on
thought we
Tuesday
kinda
night.
Figured it out. already.
Well, but no, the devil's in the details. Because the general agreement was that we would reduce the 10% to 2%, but the question is, when does that happen? Based on what Lisa wrote, if I stop paying my bill on March of 2020, I would get 10%, 10%, then on May, it would go to 2%. If I stop paying my bill in July of 2020, I'd never pay the 10%. I'd only pay the 2%. So I sent her a question to see if that was right. She said that's what it said. My suggestion is it ought to be you pay the 10% the first 2 months, regardless of when it started. Then it drops to 2% until.
That was my intent.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I thought. Okay, I'm glad you clarified, because that's what I thought we were doing, because that's would be the normal thing that we would do.
Right.
That's how I interpreted it, but I might have
Is that gonna be
interpreted
an
it.
accounting nightmare for you guys?
But we're trying to make
She's
it.
an expert.
It's just a spreadsheet.
And that's why she makes the big
With
bucks.
2,100 names on it.
No.
Are there any though that were before that date?
There are some customers that have not made a payment since January of 2020, so they incurred late fees in January of 2020, February of 2020 at 10%, March of 2020.
They should have got turned off in March 2020. Then the moratorium happened. And then they
So
got.
But there's
Yeah.
none that have been, that were
I-
on the
I
verge of
wouldn't
getting
even worry
turned off
about
that are like
that. I'd
3
just
more
give
months or something.
everybody the same thing
There-
and move on.
It's weird. 'Cause
Ain't
when-
worth breaking
There are
down,
some
is
that
it?
owe like 35 cents.
Yeah.
There are some people that owe $12. There are other people that owe $5,000. It's, to me, that's what I wanted to avoid too, is to have her get so deep into the weeds that it gets ridiculous. I just think that person who stopped in January, fine. It was 10 in January, 10 in February. It should be 10 in March, 10 in April, and then it drops to 2.
Right.
Guy who started in March, it's 10, 10, drops to 2.
Right.
You
yeah,
started in October, it's 10, 10, drop to
Yeah,
2.
anything after the
The 2
order,
months.
then
yeah.
then it's 2 or less. But if
And
there's
that's
one
not-
that could actually have 4 because they were 2 months ahead of time already, then they can get 4.
Right,
They don't just automatically get 2, because if they were under the regular ordinance, they should pay 10% for everything that they were delinquent on
And that
until
way-
the moratorium hit.
And then that
Then,
way we don't
Basically,
have
the
to change it.
2% will kick in at the time they would normally get shut off.
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Good way to look at it.
Is the way
Yeah.
we're looking at it.
That's exactly, and so that option is the second
Well-
option that was separate.
not if it was pre-COVID. And it
No,
didn't
no, I'm
get,
just talking about now. What
We're looking at now.
Yeah, everything
but
that
if there's
happened
one
up
that-
till March, it stays the same.
but I guess if there was one that was still out there, like had a delinquent balance from September and they still weren't paying on it, and it should have been incurring late fees. I don't know, maybe there aren't any that are like that. Maybe was there anybody that was shut off that was incurring late fees, but now we're gonna get rid of 6 months of 10%?
Anybody in your instance, you're talking about September of 2019?
Yeah, say something like,
They would have been shut off January of 2020.
but then they still pay late fees on,
They just owe what they owed on the day they
They have to
turned it,
come
shut it
current for
off.
us to turn their water on.
okay, so they don't keep getting 10% once you've already shut it off.
That's the beauty. That's why our system works. Because after 2 months, they're shut off, and for it to get turned back on, they have to bring everything to.
Yeah, but
current.
but we're only, even if they are turned off, we're not still charging 10% per
No.
month. Okay. Then in my, what
The
I'm,
only time that became a problem was in March of 2020, when the state said you can't turn it off.
right.
Right.
I just wonder if there's someone that had, should have been having 3 months or 4 months up till March. Like March would be the first date you had it, but if they'd been already out there for 2 months and then they got another 2 months just because of timing wise, maybe there's a few that needed 4 months of 10%.
Or there may be a few people who get caught.
But if, or maybe,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, because they wouldn't have got any extension.
Right.
if There wasn't the government getting.
right.
stepped
That was
in.
my only point though. It's like not to just automatically assume that it's only 2, because there might be one that has an extra
Right.
month on there that should have got.
So we got a motion.
So
I would also like to clarify that these two
Gary,
times,
Gary, you got
that's-
anything? I'm sorry,
that
go
these
ahead.
2 times that somebody is being charged 10% is not technically consecutive.
Say that again?
So
Oh,
in,
yeah,
a- in,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I came in and talked to her, and the examples that she pulled out of her spreadsheet make your head spin. And that's why I don't want to get into the weeds about this. I want to try to keep it as simple as possible.
Costs us 10 grand to collect 5 doesn't make sense. right? Or
Well,
whatever.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
There's somebody in there that's 35 cents, and now we're gonna. No, just.
Yeah, nor do I. Lisa, I don't understand your last point, though. Why would they not, what would be a situation where they would not be consecutive?
Say that again? I didn't hear.
Because they
The
got,
non-consecutive.
I didn't
Gary's
understand.
question is an example of when they would not be consecutive. So we're talking about 24 months here. So somebody may have not paid their bill in June and they got a $10 late fee. And then they paid it in July. And then come December, they missed a payment again and they incurred another $10 late fee. And then in March, when they were current again, they did not pay and incurred another late fee. So my example of this would be the first 2 $10 late fees would be at 10%. But the third one, which happened 9 months later, would only be at 2%.
So did they not pay their late fee when they started repaying again though, or?
Yeah, they came current. So they owed no.
yeah, they have to come current.
No, they doesn't have to, but they did.
Did.
But I don't want to confuse it, but the way that this reads is that they'll be charged the 10% for the first 2 months an account is delinquent. So within this 2-year period of time, if there's one time they're delinquent for 3 months, they're getting charged 10% for those first 2 months. They get current again, time goes on, they become delinquent a second time.
Still 10%.
I said, the way this reads now, I would say, interpret this to me, they get charged 10% again for the first 2 months as delinquent a second time.
And in her example, it would be 10% every time, because if they went delinquent in March, 10%. They paid in April, then they went delinquent in July, 10%. They paid in August, then they went delinquent in January, 10%. The first 2 times that they go delinquent consecutively, it's 10%, then it drops to 2.
But
But if they keep going
Lisa, I thought I'd understood.
paid, delinquent paid, it's 10% every time.
But if they're paid, we're not gonna give them a credit if they've already paid at this point, are we?
No,
No,
But if they're current, then they've already paid their late fees.
then they're not on the list.
right, but then if they go 2 months and they go late again.
I know, but if we're talking about someone who 6 months ago was late on a payment and then they paid that off, that should just be off the book. That part shouldn't even be on here right now.
It wouldn't be if they're current.
So you're not gonna.
No,
credit.
that's the one example that I came up with. That then it would go 10, 10 and drop to 2. Because under this and this, what I'm gonna say could not happen until March of 2020. But on March of 2020, you could have somebody who, and this is my $50, $5. They owe $50, they're delinquent, so we put $5 on it. The next month, they owe $50, they're delinquent, we put $5 on it. The next month, they still owe the $50. Now we put 2% on it, but they still owe the 210s. Now, if they pay it off, had paid it off, this is where his comes in. Now, let's suppose in March, April, May, in June, they paid it off and became current. We're not going to go back and give them a credit.
Yeah, if they
We're
paid,
done.
if they paid 10% if they were delinquent for 6
Yeah.
months or whatever and paid, if they've paid it off at this point, we're not gonna give them a credit.
No,
So if anybody's current, even if they had delinquencies over the last 2 years, they shouldn't even be on the list.
Yeah, if they're paid, they're paid.
There should only be ones that are currently delinquent.
Gary, you got something to say?
I thought Lisa had a different interpretation. I thought I understood you to say, Lisa, that it would be two 10% fees per normal, and any subsequent delinquent fees would be 2%. Is that what you said?
That is what I said, but that's not how
that's not how I
we
interpret
explained
it.
it
I
afterwards.
interpret the 2% starting when you would have had your water turned on.
Under normal circumstances.
Now, so if a person went delinquent for a month, paid it off, went delinquent for a month, paid it off, went delinquent for a month, paid it off, they would never get to the 2% because they never got to the point that their water would have been turned off.
They get 10% every time.
But then they should have already paid, if they're current, they should have already paid them,
I
right?
agree.
Okay, I understand you, Leo, now.
I'm just trying to figure out how that would even be in, like, the only thing that should be in your spreadsheet currently are people that are still delinquent. But if they've been delinquent for 6 months,
Except if we adopt this ordinance, it's effective March of 2020. They got to go back and fix them all to make them comply with the ordinance.
Because right now they're accruing at 10%.
well, I know the ones that, yeah, but that would be just anybody who's been delinquent at this point should have been delinquent for from 6 months ago to currently, not kind of on and off. Like if they,
No, I agree.
if anybody that got current at one point, we're not going to go back and reduce something that they've already paid.
No.
So I was just trying to figure out the scenario we're talking about here.
We would have to fix what they've already paid.
Yeah, that was the plan, was to go back and credit for active account holders. Staff wasn't gonna go back and credit their account.
If somebody went delinquent, I'll give you an example. If somebody went delinquent in July of 2020, they would have owed the bill, the $50 plus the $5. August, the $50 plus the $5. Under normal circumstances, and that would have ended it because they'd had their water turned off. But because they couldn't turn it off, now you get to September, it's $50 plus 10. October, it's $50 plus 10.
No.
In November, they paid off. But this ordinance says they should have only paid 2% because this is retroactive to March of 2020. And so we got to go back and fix
I
it.
guess my impression, it was only for people who are still delinquent, was my thought. Like if they've already paid their bill and they're current at this point, I would say whatever they paid their bill.
So what
fine.
you're saying, Leo, if they, let's say they were late for 12 months in a row during this period, they're accruing 10% every time. And we're saying, wait a minute, we're going to go back and discharge the 2%, assuming 10% for the first 2 months and then 2%.
Because this is effective March of 2020,
Yeah, I
right?
got you.
But this is a unique situation that we have right now that's outside of our normal process. And we're trying to, at least in my viewpoint, we don't need to be perfect with this, with all of our customers, because hopefully we never have to go
Just
through
has
this
to be
again.
fair.
It has to not only be fair, but we just have to make the financial wealth, the financial health of the enterprise fund whole. And really what makes it whole is 2%, because we weren't doing door hangers. We weren't doing anything extra for anyone that was late. So maybe from my perspective and just trying not to make this too complicated. And you're right, there's a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different people we could go through and try to figure out. And that's good if it was a policy that was going to go forward beyond April. But since we really are only talking about a fixed period of time, if maybe we could just keep that closer to the 2% and not have to kind of bounce around it. And maybe you do during the period of time, a 10%, 'cause I think it's a good point that Councilmember DeGraff had, that, you know, for the first 2 months, should be 10%, but maybe we just do that one time within that time period. So anytime in their account went delinquent, for those first 2 months is 10%, no matter when that is. But if it already happened in that time frame, it already happened. Let's just leave it during that time frame. And it's just a simple way. We're just trying to get through a very unique period of time and be fair to our
We don't want to
customers.
spend more money collecting than what it's gonna cost.
Right.
But you just made a valid point. I think it's very good. It helps me with it. Is during that period of time, we didn't do what we normally do to collect the 10%.
Exactly.
Incurring costs, if 2% covers it,
That's the impact to the enterprise funds is 2%.
Yeah. which we can make whole from the COVID money.
That's an option.
So
of
are
the
you
council.
suggesting that we
Good.
drop to 10 and just make everything 2? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that would be the easiest, but if the council wanted to still do the 10% for the first 2 months, just, we'll have a max of 2 months at 10% during that period. So anyone just gets it one time. So if they're delinquent every other time, they're doing all those other scenarios.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at if they were delinquent and then paid and delinquent.
So
and
2
paid.
delinquencies at 10, any other delinquencies are 2.
I would just think it would only apply to people who, I mean, if you already paid your bill, are they really gonna want the credit back? I mean, they might say, I should have got a credit, but
But if we're putting this in place as of March 20th, I think we have to go back and do that.
I think in terms of fairness, if people have paid multiple 10% fees and then return themselves to normal and then are delinquent again, if I understand you, Kevin, correctly, you are suggesting that we go back on those accounts and the first 2 months would be at the 10% fee, but all remaining months would be 2%. And if some of those, they've already paid the 10% fee, that their accounts would be credited. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we were doing, because the policy, of the council would be this new ordinance. So anyone who was impacted differently than this, we would make them whole. For active account holders, we're not going to go send checks to people who have already
Yeah.
moved out of Ripon, but for those that are still active, we would credit the account for that.
I think for fairness, that's the way it has to be.
I think that.
I
makes
think we
sense.
need to if we're gonna put this in place.
Yeah, and if I was just gonna look a little closer at the second option that Lisa gave, I think if the council was interested, if we changed that third line to be 10% for 2 months during this period, an account is delinquent, and 2% rest of the remaining term.
For any 2 months.
Yeah.
For just two,
Yeah,
for any
you
2
get 2
months.
10s and after that it's
For any 2 months.
well, the first 2 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Because if you said any, then if they're.
right,
If there's
Well,
multiple-
the point is whether it doesn't have to be consecutive.
right.
That's what we're
Right,
trying
just
to
2
do.
months during that period, they'll get 10%. Any other time in there, they'll get charged the 2%.
Are we adopting or what are we doing?
This is an urgency ordinance, so the first thing we do is we adopt the findings of urgency that are laid out in the ordinance. And we incorporate those into a motion. So the motion would be to waive reading of the ordinance and adopt the urgency ordinance by a 4/5 vote.
So moved.
Second,
I'm gonna call vote.
yeah.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
Graff,
Yes.
Zuber,
Yes.
Stucia,
Yes.
Euchre.
Yes.
Motion passes
With that,
5-0.
done?
Oh, hold on. So is this ordinance here written right then for what we just talked about?
I would add during this period, right?
That one, Mike, is not correct. It's going to be this red line version that's going to be dropped into that.
Into here.
The red line version from
It's
here is
this
going to be
one.
dropped into that
Right,
one.
well, I
Yes.
got that one.
That's the one.
Right, but how about, oh, I see, this just goes on the back of that.
That's right.
So this is boilerplate here, okay, I got you.
And Lisa, the only thing we need to change on this, the second version of this, for the 2 months during this period, right, to limit that. And then
Yeah.
I think that's.
Got it.
Are we good? Good night.
That's the longest one item special meeting I've ever percent.
Well, we could have got it done a lot quicker if you let me take it off.
Gary, do you have anything you want to bring up?
No,